Good morning, everyone. Uh, Welcome to you to this morning's study. We're going to continue looking at uh, Daniel chapter 11, verse 1 and 2. But before we begin, can you join me in a word of prayer? Dear Father in heaven, we are grateful for the time that we have each morning to open your word. And we invite your Spirit's presence here as we seek to understand the truths for this time. And we pray, Lord, for each person who is searching. We ask for your Holy Spirit to do work upon our hearts. We ask that you can guide and direct in the things that we study, and that we can understand them clearly, and that the things that we learn, we can share with others. Help us to be practical in all that we do. Be with us now through thy Spirit, we pray and ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so we were discussing yesterday regarding the 3-1 combination, and we were also addressing how our understanding of Daniel 11 relates to Revelation 17. And I was not, specifically trying to say what other people were doing. I wasn't specifically talking about any person. But I think the basic principles are that when we make an application, we need to understand that application needs to be able to be represented on a line. And the fact that we have a 3-1 combination here with these kings, so that is, we have 3 that are going to yet stand up in Persia, and then a 4th. So what does this 3-1 combination mean? How would we place this on a line? In a sense, we've already done that, but we may not have realized it. So when we drew the line of the temple, even though this is not specifically referring to the temple, we should be able to see that there is a 3-1 combination there. Right. So here, I'm just going to go back to this line we had drawn earlier. So in this line of the temple, we have, of course, this is going to begin with Cyrus, but we have in there implied, because this is going to talk about the work of the enemies. And maybe that's what we would have to do, is we'd have to zoom into this line somewhere to find those 3 that are going to stand up. So let's think about these lines. So we have this line of the decrees. So the line of the decrees has 3 decrees and a 4th. So that's a 3-1 combination, correct? We have Cyrus, Darius, Artaxerxes decrees, and then the 4th decree is Artaxerxes' 2nd decree, sometimes called Nehemiah's decree. It technically is a letter that's given to Nehemiah, but it is still considered one of the decrees. And actually, some groups, especially people like Usher, he would take that 2nd decree of Artaxerxes as the starting point for the 70 weeks, because he's going to place it in 454 BC, and from there he's going to count the 70 weeks. It's a different way of doing it. So And there's other people who sort of follow that tradition. That is, they move Artaxerxes 10 years earlier, as Usher did, and then uh, they're going to use the second decree to reach to Christ, the second decree of Artaxerxes. But anyway, if we have those decrees, we can see that there's three plus a fourth. Now, we've also done this line of the temple, and in this line of the temple, we're going to have three waymarks. That is, we're going to have Cyrus, we're going to have Darius, and then that third is going to be that Passover in the dedication of the temple. And we also know that we're going to have Xerxes, right? So here in this history, even though we don't see Cambyses and False Smyrtus listed as waymarks, they still are there. So maybe we would have to have a line of these three kings, Cambyses, False Smyrtus, and Darius, and then the fourth would be Xerxes, right? If we were going to draw a line. So could we draw a line of these kings? Would it be profitable to do that? And how would we do that? What would be the time of the end, etc.? Or is it just a 3-1 combination that we don't draw a line of? And if we then would relate to that to our history, what are the three? Who do those three kings represent in our history? That might help you a little bit more. So we line up Cambyses with who? Okay, did somebody say something?
Wouldn't it be Reagan?
What's that, Dwight?
Wouldn't it be Reagan?
Cambyses? No. Reagan lines up with Darius the Mede.
Okay.
And then Cyrus lines up with Bush the First.
Right.
And so Cambyses lines up with Clinton, right?
All right.
Okay. And then you have Clinton lining up with Cambyses. Then you have False Smyrtus line up with Bush the Second, right? That's how we.
Go ahead.
And then we have Obama lining up with Darius, right? And then after Obama is Trump, and we line him up with Xerxes. So if we were going to draw a line that was just a 3-1 combination of those kings, that is, if we took Clinton, Bush the Second, Obama, and then we had Trump. So we'd have those three to be a line in and of themselves. And the question is, what would they illustrate? Right? If we're going to apply that line to our history, how would we do that? Because it's a 3-1 combination. So it suggests a line. And so we should be able to draw a line in Persian history with those 4 kings. And then what would that represent in our history? People understand what I'm asking. If we were to draw a line here, so I'm just borrowing this from this one. You're going to have a line of these kings. A simple way to do this is I'll just get 7.1. I'll get rid of these two. Oops. Okay, so we have 7 waymarks, and first angel arriving, formalization, second angel. I guess we gotta get a couple more of these. So we should be able to create a line of these kings. And so with each of these kings, so you would have Cambyses, and the thing is, we may not right now know enough to understand how to create these lines. Because we don't know a lot about Cambyses, like personal level. We generally don't know much about him, how we would have what occurs in his history. So we'd have to learn a bit more about that. Okay. So if Cambyses arrives, if he's the king that arises at a first message, so he's the first king, and we're going to line him up. We're going to do it this way. We'll just go Cambyses, Clinton. So somehow we have to connect Cambyses and Clinton. So what's going to happen in the time of Cambyses? He's going to be the descendant of Cyrus. Anybody know about his history? What happened to him? I know he had some dishonor of some sort. And he's also referred to as Cambyses II. He's going to be king until 522. It's going to be false Smyrtus that's going to, and I probably actually need to get a 4th waymark in here. Right, so we know he has some kind of dishonor that affects him.
Okay, so you just said he was going to be king until 522, right?
Yeah, that's when false Smyrtus becomes, kills him. So
Okay, so the symbology of that, where he becomes king in 522, points also to a time of judgment, doesn't it?
Well, yeah. So Darius becomes king in 522. So Cambyses is going to be from 530 to 522. And in 522, what you're going to have is you're going to have false Smyrtus is going to be king of Persia for 7 months. Right? So that's going to be the second angel arriving.
So we have the 7 months pointing to the 7 times. We have 522, which if we were to rearrange the numbers, we would have 252 as well.
Yeah. And remember that it's going to be um, that 7 months is going to end with the 10th day of the 7th month, when he's going to be killed by Darius. So Darius the Persian is going to kill false Smyrtis on the 10th day of the 7th month. It's September 29th, 522. So there's going to be 7 months, and then there's going to be the Day of Atonement in that history of false Smyrtis. And false Smyrtis brings about the end of the building of the temple. And Darius coming to the throne in 522, he's going to be the one who's the king during the resumption of the rebuilding of the temple, and he's going to give the second decree. So if we're going to place so if we're going to place a line here, you can start to see how the symbols fit into a line, and it's not a line that we've ever drawn. We've never tried to just say, well, there's a 3-1 combination, so we should take these kings and make them a 3-1 combination, right? Now, we know, of course, too, then Xerxes is going to be that 4th king, right? So that 4th king then is that 4th angel's message arriving. And we have done the history of Xerxes when we did Esther, right? And we know that's the Sunday law history. So I'm just going to keep putting this information in here so that we can start sorting it out. So now we're going to have false Smyrtis. And he's going to be connected to Bush II. Now, if this is the second angel arriving, I mean, we can line this up with our history, because the second angel arriving, it occurs in the time of Bush II, right?
Yeah, 9/11, yeah.
Yeah, at 9/11. So that fits. Now we know that false Smyrtis then is going to have this 7 months, so we could, I'm just going to pull one of these things here. So however we want to sort of depict this, I guess the best way would be, you're going to have 7 months. And that 7 months is then going to end on October, well, it's not October 22nd, but on that symbolic date, the 10th day of the 7th month. So we just put here, we'll do it down like this. Okay. So that's going to be the 10th day of the 7th month, and you can see how that symbol lines up with the 3rd angel's message arriving. So we're just kind of constructing this as we go. I haven't actually thought this through yet. And then we're going to have Darius, of course, the Persian, and he's going to line up with Obama. Right. So we're lining these up as we have already, right? We're not, but we just have them in a line now. And then we finally have Xerxes, which is Trump. And in that history, that's going to be the history here of the Sunday law. Now we know that this whole line, of course, is not the major line, that this is not the line of the 3 decrees. This is the line of the 3 kings plus the 4th. And we can see then how the history of Trump relates to the Sunday law. Correct? Because that's Millerite history, and then that's our history. if we wanted to look at that fourth angel arriving as being our history. Now, we could also relate it to Millerite history, and we could see that the fourth angel arriving is also in Millerite history, 1863. That is we have the Millerites, October 22nd, and then we have this fourth angel arrive in that first generation. And that history typifies the Sunday law, right? And in that history, when we go through, from 1850, 1863, 1888, where the third angel is rejected, we can see how that history represents the Sunday law. And you can even zoom into 1888 and you get that line that Jones is a part of that deals with 1893 and 1892 and 93, right? So that history there, addressing what was happening with the World's Fair and so forth. Right? Is this kind of making sense? Or anybody have questions about what we just...
It seems to add up at this point.
Okay. So when we're doing this, we're zooming into, because we have the line of the temple, and we know the line of the temple is a zoom into a waymark. Now, this would probably be, this is sort of the work of the enemies, is part of this line. So I'm not sure what we're zooming into. So in the line of the three decrees, we have the three decrees deal with the idea that you have a captivity, you have a time of the end. The time of the end is the 70 years for Babylon and at Babylon. There's two different 70-year periods that mark this double time of the end. And so we can see with the decrees, we have a clearly defined period of darkness, and we can see that the decrees work towards a certain end. That is the ending of the captivity, the restoration of Judah, the city of Jerusalem, the temple. All those things are done under those three decrees. And then we zoomed into the line of the temple. And so that was addressing, instead of the 70 years captivity, it was addressing the temple itself. Right? So that's going to be Zechariah and Haggai's prophesying. And it's still going to have a connection to the 70 years. But that 70 years is broken up as the 49 years of the Jubilee, the return of the people, and then the 21 years to the second decree, which is going to complete the temple itself. Right? So just to look at this line again, right? So you can see this line of the temple. It has this 21 years and the 49 years. And one thing that we could have done here is just add this 21 years here at the top, just to sort of show this. Right. So this period here to here is going to be 21 years. Right. So, oops. You understand what I'm doing here? You understand, because we looked at this last week, but so you can see this is 21 years and 70 years, and this is 70 years and 21 years, which we know is 91 years, which is 13 times 7, obviously. But this 49 years here, with this 21 years to make up that period of time, you can see in a sense there's 49 and 21 here to make up this 70 years. Right? So these are a type of prophetic mirror. Okay, and so here, you're going to have this sabbatical rest that's going to happen for 40. There's no temple. Then when Cyrus comes to the throne, he's going to be giving a prophecy for the laying of the foundation of the temple, right? So the return of the people, right? So we have Cyrus gives this decree, then they build the altar, then they lay the foundation of the temple. That's the first message. then the work of the enemies, and then under the prophesying of Haggai and Darius's decree, then you're going to have the completion or the dedication of the temple. That's going to be 7 years and whatever it was, 7 months or 5 months later, however we looked at that. And then you have this Passover, which is this third angel arriving. So if we look at this is a zoom into probably the second angel's message. It's probably more a zoom into the temple when it gets built, right? So it's a zoom into that. It goes back and includes this history, which is part of the decrees themselves. So if we look at this one, what is this a zoom into? What waymark are we zooming into when we address these three kings plus the fourth? Because we must be zoomed into something, some waymark on some line. So what waymark could we be zoomed into, and on what line? Would it be on the line of the decrees? And if it's on the line of the decrees, what waymark is it? Any thoughts? Because we need to know what the darkness is and what this line is about. If we're going to have this line, we need to know what it is.
Well, the opposite of the decrees could be the Sunday law, right? The process of the Sunday law.
Okay.
The darkness part.
Okay, so we have Cambyses, right? I mean, obviously the enemies are what are being addressed in this history. So when we go to Daniel chapter 11, verse 2, where it says, "And now I will show thee the truth," that is what is revealed in the scripture of truth. "Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the fourth shall be far richer than they all." Now we know that the first 3 kings are all addressing the work of the enemies. That is, in that history, because we see this in the story of Ezra, you're going to have the Samaritans seeking to first be involved in the construction of this temple. And then when they're rebuffed, they're then going to be opposing this, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So in that history, we can see that this is about the work of the enemies. Now, we don't see this explicitly stated in Daniel 11, verse 2. But if we think about chapter 10, we have this controversy going on between Christ and Satan over God's people. And Cyrus is going to make the decision to issue this decree. And we believe it's on the 24th day of the first month in 537 BC that he issues that decree. And that's why the angel Gabriel and Christ can come to Daniel after his 21 days of prayer and seeking God and give him this message, right? That the victory has been won. But then he's going to say, well, the victory's been won, but Greece is going to be coming, right? And you need to know what's coming. There's going to be this work of the enemies, right? Now, he doesn't say that, which you can see in the context of going back and knowing the history of Ezra, that is what is being talked about, that there is this time, right? Because he says, also in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm and strengthen him. So there's this controversy going on. So even though he's given this prophecy, he knows that the temple now is going to be rebuilt, right? Well, he knew that from chapter 9 because he knows it's going to be destroyed, but he didn't know when it was going to be rebuilt. And now he's being told, yes, the decree has been issued. And there's this controversy going on between Satan and Christ. That's why we have Michael there, because he's always represented in this conflict with Satan, this challenge, who is like God? And so if we just go back again to chapter 10, we get to the end here. He said, knowest thou wherefore I come unto thee, in verse 20, and now I will return to fight with the prince of Persia. And when I am gone forth, lo, the prince of Grecia shall come. So now we know this prince of Persia is not the king of Persia. That is, it's not talking about Cyrus, because he's the king of Persia. Now, some people would speculate, well, maybe the prince of Persia is Cambyses, and we need to look at him and understand his history a little bit more. But though we take the position that the prince of Persia here is really a reference to Satan. And so this is a spirit of Satan that he manifests in Persia. And then there's going to be the prince of Grecia. Well, again, this has to be some manifestation of Satan. If the prince of Persia is Satan, the prince of Grecia must be Satan himself as well, right? It's some work of Satan. And then he says, but I will show thee that which is noted in the scripture of truth, that there's none that holdeth me with me in these things but Michael your prince. So this is, again, the great controversy that's being worked out. So when he talks about the three that will yet stand up, they'll stand up yet 3 kings in Persia. So we know, and that word yet means before Grecia is going to come, right? Now, Grecia doesn't come, in some ways we say, well, there's all these kings of Persia and it's not till, Persia's conquered by Alexander the Great. But we know that Persia loses this battle, that is, Xerxes does. And so we need to understand how that relates to that history in the book of Ezra, because this is still prophecy in the book of Daniel. It's not history yet when he's given this message. And so we've never really addressed this. I mean, we'll talk about, historically what happens. We compare sort of Obama with Darius the Persian because of all the taxation. But, we've never really looked at these histories in much detail. But is that starting to make sense on how we look at this verse 2, that we have to understand it in the context of Ezra chapter 4, 5, and 6?
It'd be good to get more detail on those kings' actions, their actions.
Right. And so we know some things about
some things, yeah.
About Cambyses, for instance. We know so he was a governor. So I'm just reading here from Wikipedia, and some of these things I know and some of these things I are new, but he's the governor of Babylon or Babylonia under his father from April to December of 538. So I knew about this history, that there's this time that Cambyses, the son of Cyrus, is going to be a governor of northern Babylonia. So he's given this responsibility. Now, something happens that affects his relationship with his father. And we don't know what it is. There's different speculations in history, gossip, rumors, and so forth. So he was appointed by his father's co-ruler in 530 BC, and then so in 530, so that's normally when we mark the reign of Cambyses, from 530 to 522. And his father goes on to an expedition against the Massagetae of Central Asia, where he dies. So Cambyses thus becomes the sole ruler of the vast Achaemenid Empire. I can never pronounce that word, facing no reported opposition. So now there's something though that happens in that history that they're not mentioning, that I'm not sure about. So he ends up, when he goes on one of these expeditions in 522, in the spring of 522, Cambyses hurriedly left Egypt to deal with a rebellion in Persia. So he had been going through this battle in Egypt, establishing himself in Egypt. And while en route to Syria, he received a wound to the thigh, which was soon affected by gangrene, and Cambyses died 3 weeks later in a location called Ecbatana, which is most likely the modern city of Hama. Agbatana, so that's not Ecbatana, it's a different place. He died childless and was thus succeeded by his younger brother, Bardia, who ruled for a short period before being overthrown by Darius the Great. Now, this is a false history in the sense that what they believe, what scholars believe now, is that there is no false Smyrtus. They just believe that was something being made up by Darius, that he was an imposter. So this is going to have a different view on that in Wikipedia than we take. So I'm just trying to see if they have this part. Yeah, both Cambyses and Cyrus carried the title King of Babylon, King of the Lands, right? So that has to do with that Cyrus, he was appointed him as a co-ruler, right? And you'll see this in the ancient documents. They'll have these different titles for them. So this doesn't have in Wikipedia, it doesn't have the history of what happened to him. So they're leaving out quite a bit here. Kind of surprised they don't have that history. Right. And then you have modern scholarship. They always have all kinds of theories about what they think actually happened instead of what history records. So they just say, oh, all these stories about what happened, they're all made up. We know what actually happened, right? Which I always find very interesting that somebody thousands of years later can figure out what they think really happened must have happened rather than what.
Mighty convenient of them.
Yeah, it just seems to me sort of ridiculous. And we all know that even in contemporary events, it's hard to know what actually is happening. But to sort of reconstruct past history based upon, well, they probably recorded this, but this other thing really happened, doesn't make sense to me. That they sort of think they can reconstruct history so long after the fact without any evidence, just supposition. But that's modern historians. It's historical revisionism. But anyway, so now under Cambyses, there isn't specifically, so if we go to Ezra, well, I could look at Encyclopedia Britannica, I actually have another source that's better. I just don't have it set up. Because I take Xenophon's history as being more accurate than Herodotus. So anyway, we have in Ezra chapter 4, this is going to be these adversaries, right? So we know it just says they hired counselors against them to frustrate their purpose all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even unto the reign of Darius, king of Persia. And in the reign of Ahasuerus, we know that's going to be Cambyses. In the beginning of his reign wrote they unto him an accusation against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem. Now that's all we have. We don't, there's no looking into the records or anything like that under Cambyses. It's just, there's an accusation written by the inhabitants of the land, or written against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem, right? So we know that happens in the time of Cambyses. But in the days of false Smyrnus, it's Artaxerxes' name here, wrote Bishlam, Mithridath, Tabeel, and the rest of their companions unto Artaxerxes, king of Persia, that it's under false Smyrnus. And it's going to be this that's going to stop the building of the temple. So if we're going to draw this on a line, we need to have something in this history that aligns with our history. So under Clinton, so Clinton is the king of the United States from what years to what year?
'92 to 2000.
Yeah. So he's 8 years. He's going to be the king of the United States, the president. Now, in trying to decide in his history what the work of the enemies is, or what these waymarks are, what events could we mark from that period, 92 to 2000? So in that history, what occurs within this movement, within the church, that we can mark? So under Cambyses, he becomes this king. Where would we mark, the events of his life? I mean, he's going to have, all we really have is from the Bible, is that there is going to be a letter of complaint written about God's people and sent to Cambyses, but there's no response that we know of. So how would we address this?
Waco.
Okay. So we do have some interesting events. Waco is definitely something that happens under Clinton's rulership, right?
Agree.
Now, okay. So we have two events that we have already marked, and we have the bombing of the World Trade Center, right? That's going to happen a couple of days before Waco occurs. So that's what, February 26th or something like that? And then you're going to have Waco itself. And I don't know if you want to put both of these in here, but I'm just going to say so you got the World Trade Center bombing, and then I'm just going to simply say, now how do these relate? Like, we know that this is related to the second angel arriving, right? That is, you have the first message, and the first message leads to the second message, correct?
Right.
Okay. And we know the second message is, in that second message, we're going to have the fall of the World Trade Center. And we're going to have a number of other things. We're going to have, within the Adventist Church, we have the acceptance of spiritual formation, and that being urged upon as, in order to pass as a minister, you have to take this course in spiritual formation. You're going to have the Patriot Act that's going to be enacted, and you're going to have the bombing of the World Trade Center, or not the bombing, the fall of the World Trade Center. All of those things occur in connection with Bush II, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we can see this line starts to fill in just by looking at the events in our history. So we can see the events in our history, and we can see, especially with false Smyrtus, how that would be related. Right? Because in false Smyrtus, you're going to have this report. You're going to have this oppression of God's people. They can't complete the building of the temple. It has to cease. Now, but now we have Darius. So we're saying Darius and Obama are parallel to each other. Now Darius, in this case, in the Old Testament there, he's going to be allowing them to resume the building of the temple. Now, how does Obama relate to that? What is it in Obama's history? Now, this is, of course, the third angel arriving. So we don't have a formalization or an empowerment. We just have Obama becomes the king of the United States. But here in this case, what parallels it is the symbol of the 10th day of the 7th month, the Sunday law symbolism. So what happens in Obama's history that relates to the Sunday law? And it's not that Obama is allowing us to rebuild the temple, but something happens in Obama's history that would relate to what's going to follow, right? In our movement, so that there is so Obama, of course, we know that the history, the end of Obama and the beginning of the Trump relate to this movement specifically, right? And why do I say that? Okay, just think about the history of Obama and try to understand its parallel to our movement. What is it about Obama?
I'm trying to think.
I
A lot
know.
to think about.
Yeah, I know. Okay, so we know that what is Obama really known for? Let's put it that way.
being
Are
the
we
first.
compromise? No, sorry.
You're fine.
I just say compromise
Okay.
for Bob. So.
Dwight?
Was he not the first Islamic president?
Okay. So, yeah, so definitely has connections with Islam, right?
And I do agree he definitely compromised a lot, and not in a good way.
Yeah. Okay. So, and we know that there's this transition from Obama to Trump. So at that time, so if we look at the history of Obama and the history of this movement, what is it that we're learning in that history, especially the latter part of Obama's history?
Well, in the years that he was president, we had quite a bit that came out within the movement on different items that we needed to pay attention with.
Okay. So what are those?
We began to understand more fully what the 7 times really meant, how the 7 times are going to unlock our understanding of the sanctuary, how we needed to be approaching the understanding both of the first and the second angel's message in order to prepare us to clearly give the third angel's message. All of these foundations were being laid during the time that Obama was president.
Yeah, and so he's president from
2008 to 2016.
Yeah, so we count from when the election is, right? I mean, because the transition happens in 2017 when Trump
right
takes the throne. So in that history of 2008 to 2016, there's a lot of development of an understanding of this message. Now, we already had the 2520 in place, but it's really going to be the time in which this movement becomes recognized. And there's a lot of opposition to this movement in that period of time. That is, I would say prior to 2008, because even probably it's not until about 2008, because of the 2520, this movement starts to be targeted. Really, prior to that, this movement isn't on anybody's radar. Nobody cares. And Jeff, he's speaking at lots of different places. There isn't this real opposition to him. Now, most of the opposition is in the Pacific Northwest that does arise. So, because the movement is fairly strong there. A little bit in Arkansas because of that other school that's near where Jeff lives. But basically, this movement, I think, develops what it becomes in that period of time. I mean, that's the most development and change that happens in the movement. Would people agree with me there? The truths come thick and fast,
right
especially the end of that.
Yeah.
So,
that.
and so, once you get to 2016, and we're talking about, Trump's going to be the next president. There's all of these new truths. Chronology has come into the movement. So when we get to, and marking like specific dates here, we can mark specific dates for the bombing of the World Trade Center, February 26th. Waco, I believe, is February 28th, right? And it's going to go all the way till April 19th. So I'd probably put April 19th as the date there. And then the second angel arriving, false Smyrtus, whether we just take that as the election, I don't know, of George Bush the second, George W. Bush. And then now, and of course, in connection with George W. Bush, his election, what's the distinguishing feature about that history when he gets elected? Remember, he's and I'm trying to remember because he runs against. Does he run against Al Gore?
Yeah, it's Gore. Yes.
In the first election, and that's the one with the hanging chads.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is I think of it as kind of a humorous part of American political history, but that's just from a Canadian's perspective. But we start to see that the American democracy is sort of hanging by a thread, so to speak. At that time, we start to see this much more manifest, this polarization.
They were arguing over the elections too. There, Al Gore disputed the election.
He what the election?
He disputed it. Al Gore did.
Yeah, right. So that's what I'm saying is you start to see this when Bush wins, it's like, well, I didn't lose in a fair battle. It wasn't fair. And you see that when Hillary loses to Trump, same type of thing. When Trump loses to Biden, I don't know if prior to that there was many really disputed presidential elections that were so close and that people when they lost said they won.
I can't remember any either.
Okay. No, there were disputed elections before. John Quincy. Okay, yeah. John Quincy Adams against Andrew Jackson, approximately 1826, because there was a lot of battle over whether the way that the Electoral College at that point operated was correct. You had Rutherford B. Hayes against Samuel Tilden as well, where the Electoral College stepped in. So
that would be way in the past, right? Not within our memories.
Not within our collective living memories, but in history, yes, it has occurred.
Yeah. But now we've had it almost a consistent thing that you have the United States split and polarized, right?
Well, the election with John Quincy Adams against Andrew Jackson split and polarized the country, and that's what led to the formation and the rise of the Democrat Party.
Right. Yeah. So that's going to be, in a sense, a parallel history to ours.
Right, because Andrew Jackson was a president that hated the Native Americans and believed that slavery was necessary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we can see these parallels in the past. But what we have now presently is leading to a civil war. It's basically a cold civil war at present. But I think we could go back, to Bush the second, and that bitterness of losing that election to the Republicans. The Democrats definitely created new strategies on how to defeat the Republicans which were, I don't think, from my perspective, I don't think that they were honest or conscientious in how they were seeking to win elections.
Agreed.
So I think that that's something that really just came to a fore there because they really believed that they had control of the media and that they would just win the election. And when Bush won, I think that was a bit of a shock. And so behind the scenes, I'm not behind the scenes, so I can't tell you exactly what happened. But it seems like what has happened is they've created these strategies. Um, you know, basically the race baiting is part of that to get people to vote Democrat who are black and minorities and so forth, and yet do nothing for them to make it look like they're the ones who are championing these causes, when in reality they're the ones that are doing the most damage. So, and of course, under the history of with Biden, we see they took advantage of the pandemic to get those few votes to push them over the edge. Not enough to bring criminal charges or to bring, to change the results in the election, by showing that there was election fraud. But it seems pretty obvious to anybody looking at it objectively that there was election fraud. It's just how do you prove it, especially when you have a court system that's controlled by Democrats. It's pretty much impossible. I think people would probably agree with me on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the United States is in a crisis. It's a democracy that's in a crisis, acting really much more like a third world country in a lot of ways. The level of respect for the other side, honesty, integrity, all those things are thrown out the window, and all you have are a facade of these things. And it's pretty obvious to anybody looking from the outside what's happening in the United States, that it's not the nation it once was. Even though it was never perfect, it definitely is. The cracks are showing in its democracy. So, under Bush, if we're going to try to say what is it now, and if we look at these work of the enemy, so if we're taking this line and we see, well, we have Clinton coming into power, we have this bombing of the World Trade Center, we have Waco. Those are going to be the things that are characterized under Clinton's reign. We can see that the enemy here is an external enemy with the World Trade Center bombing, but an internal enemy with Waco. So it seems to me that the enemies here, that this line is addressing the fall of the United States, right? If we're going to look at it, it's the fall of the United States that's paralleling the rise of this message. Does that make sense?
Yeah, seems to be that way.
Because these waymarks in this history are these waymarks that are meaningful to us prophetically, but they are the waymarks of the fall of the United States, leading to the Sunday Law. Okay, so under Bush II, then, what events would we mark? I mean, we have the Gulf War. We have, of course, the 9/11, right? So what are we going to mark as the second angel arriving, the second angel formalized, the second angel empowered? I mean, we could just put Bush II there, the election itself, as the second angel arriving. Okay, so if that's the case, So what do we want to put as the second angel formalized? And just to say, with false Smyrtus, it's this, um, this whole debate whether he's actually Bardia or whether, who he is or whatever. Um, but we take the position it's false Smyrtus, which would disagree with modern scholarship, but agree with scholarship of the past, agree with history. Because there's actually no history that would agree with the modern interpretation of who he is, right? It's just revisionist history that has created that. So we can see how that election parallels this. So I was going to put like uncertainty. I don't know. Dispute. Maybe dispute is good. Okay. Put that there. Now, so 9/11 is going to happen, well, basically a year after Bush becomes president, right? So he becomes president in 2000. And then.
No,
No.
Because the World Trade Center occurs roughly 8 months, just shy of 8 months after Bush is inaugurated.
Right. So we have that. So when Bush comes to power, right. So, but the election's in the year 2000, right? So I'm just saying that's a year. Right? That's all I'm saying.
Okay, the election is in November of 2000, but it's not certified until December of 2000.
Yeah. So I'm just calling that a year. Okay. So it's a year later. And is there anything of note that happens in that period up to 9/11? Or would just 9/11 be the formalization of this issue? Because, after 9/11, then of course you're going to have the Gulf War, right? And so probably we would put 9/11 here. So I'm just going to do this for now, but so you got the Gulf War. Now 9/11 we have as a prophetic message. Now maybe there's something other than the Gulf War that we would mark. So any thoughts on this? I'm just putting that there and looking at it. So what is this line telling us altogether? Now, I mean, the Gulf War leads to some degree to Obama coming into power. At least that's my perspective.
The Patriot Act, Patriot Act,
Well, you
Patriot
have
Act.
so you have the Patriot Act, and you have this response to 9/11, which now initially Bush gets reelected, right? Um, to a large degree because of the success of 9/11 in their response initially. At least that's the way that I understand it. Right. So Bush serves 2 terms. His dad only managed to serve 1 term, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Which I mean, he had the war in Kuwait, where I think that made him not win the 2nd term. I think to some degree. I'm not sure specifically. Who knows why Americans elect who they do? Um, but George Bush was pretty popular after 9/11. But he definitely lost his popularity with the Gulf War, the weapons of mass destruction that they were looking for that they didn't find. So obviously he could only serve 2 terms. But one of the reasons Obama came into power is that the Republicans under George Bush, he developed a bad name in his 2nd term. I don't know if people agree with me on that or not. Yeah, I'm not an expert on American politics, but
Well, okay, let's remember
yeah.
in American politics, you have a parameter where the only president that's been elected to more than 2 terms was Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Yeah, because they changed it so you can't be elected to 2 terms.
Correct. However, Bush, in his 2nd term, was having issues because the economy began to show cracks and began to falter.
Okay.
So when you come into this with Obama and the fact that Obama ran against a very weak Republican opponent,
Right.
because he was seen as being too much of an old man.
Yeah, that was what was his name?
Bob Dole.
Oh, Bob Dole. That was Bob Dole. Okay.
You have Bob Dole, and then after that, you had McCain and Palin.
Yeah, that was the second one. Yeah.
Now,
okay. Yeah.
When you're going to put up a candidate to run that is basically not giving a message, and all Obama did is say, I'm young, I'm vibrant, I know what I'm going to do. And he didn't give a message, but his message was better than the other message.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, are these waymarks making sense, or should there be some other waymarks that we use here?
No, you've got the waymarks in the proper places.
Yeah. Okay. Now, so going through these histories, this is what we're going to do tomorrow. We're just going to go through this history. I'm going to organize, if I have time. I've been so busy, but trying to get some of this information regarding Cambyses and false Smyrtus put together for you. And there was. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just reading a little bit here. So this on the Britannica article in Cambyses, which is better than the Wikipedia article. Okay. So if we look at this line, the question is, what is this line about? I mean, I said it's about the fall of the United States moving towards a Sunday law. We see this attack by Islam. In both of these, we have a formalization, which is going to be February 26th, 1993, and then September 11th, 2001. So those two events are attacks on the World Trade Center. And then we have Waco. So that's going to be, basically an internal rebellion to some degree in the United States. And then you have the Gulf War, which creates, even though it's an external battle, it creates a lot of internal conflict within the United States over this war. And the other thing that I think that we sort of can't neglect in this history is the rise of the internet and its effect upon American politics. I don't know how you would mark that in a line. But when you finally get to, when you get to Obama, in that history, we do have the internet. But it's going to be Trump who actually takes advantage of social media to get elected. And of course, by manipulating the media, which he successfully continues to do. Takes advantage of Trump derangement syndrome. So anyway, is this a valid line that we can say we have these three kings that are going to rise up, and then there's the fourth, and the fourth is Trump. So we know, based upon how we understand Trump and Xerxes, that is a history that's a type of the Sunday law, right?
Right.
So this is all leading up to that. It's all leading to Xerxes. We can see that when we compare it with our history of these presidents and these kings. And now you should also be able to see that in the history of Persia, right? Because it says the prince of Grecia is going to come. Now Xerxes is, now the question is, why does Xerxes, and if you understand Persia, Persia is quite a bit different than Rome, quite a bit different than Greece on how they operated. So Rome was, they conquered nations. People wanted to become a part of their empire. And they were different from Babylon, right? So we know that if we look at these different kingdoms, you look at, Babylon was basically a protection racket. Media Persia comes on the scene, and Media Persia is about the rule of law, and they have this large kingdom, and what they provide is an infrastructure. That's what Persia provides. They provide this infrastructure of roads and transportation and law and order, so that goods can be transported without them always being stolen. So there's all kinds of security and safety that happens under Persia. And then, of course, Greece, we know it's for its art and its philosophy. And then, of course, Rome it's going to be this syncretistic power. So, I mean, it sort of combines all of these different elements. It has some elements of the protection racket. It has definitely the elements of law and order and infrastructure, but it also has the art and philosophy. Right. So anyway, we'll see how that pans out. For now, what we want to see is that this is, this is the history of Persia, but it's the history of the United States. And there's this development or understanding of things that happen in Persia that lead to Xerxes. That is, Xerxes is going to have this war against Greece. And the question is why, right? Why does he have a war against Greece? Why couldn't he just stay where he is? Because, is Greece really a threat to Persia? I don't know how much we know about that history.
Doesn't appear to be.
Yeah, to me, it doesn't appear to be. From what I've read in history, it shouldn't really be a threat. Now, under Alexander, of course, it does become a threat. So you can see that Alexander provides the means whereby he can conquer Persia. But it's also Persia in a weakened state. The best thing for Persia is if it just continued to develop its infrastructure and support and strengthen itself, it would have been much better off. Xerxes going to battle against Greece was really a fruitless endeavor. It didn't really make sense. It didn't really go along with the idea of what Persia was. But that's what happened. He lost against Greece. But the thing is, that's when Greece comes into history. So we know that they're not going to introduce Greece later. They're going to go, Cambyses, false Smyrtus, Darius, and now Xerxes, and then Greece. And so when Medo-Persia or Persia comes against Greece, that's when Greece comes into history from a biblical perspective. Now, of course, Greece has come into history, but the next thing you're going to see is Alexander the Great. Right? So that's what we see in these verses. Now, a dispute, if you want to call it that, a conflict, a disagreement, a variance of opinion, however you want to characterize it, between what Colin was presenting and what I understand is that you can't just take the idea that it's going to be the United States all the way down, right? Now, I understand that we have the statue in Daniel chapter 3, and these are the things that we're going to be looking at. But when you're looking at Daniel chapter 11, there definitely is a distinction historically between Persia and Greece. And this goes back to December 25th, 2021, because the question that I had is, if you're going to take historically that this is Medo-Persia and Greece, then how are we going to address that within the United States? And the way that I would look at it would be that you have to have the United States being conquered by Greece. So this mighty king that stands up, being Alexander, has to be Greece. It has to be the globalists, right?
Ultimately, it'd be the king of the north conquering the United States.
Well, this would be okay. Yeah. So you have Greece is I don't know if you'd have it as the king of the north, because you don't have the king of the north yet. You're going to have those.
Well, not Greece. Not Greece is the king of the north, but it gives power to the.
But we have But we have the Democrats, we have the globalists symbolically as the king of the South. So if you're going to take the history where we say that what happens in Daniel 11, verse 40 to 45 is parallel to this history, then Alexander the Great has to be the globalists. He can't represent Trump.
Right.
Okay. So, and that was the dispute I always had with Jeff when he would try to say, well, this is going to be Trump at the head of the UN. Even then, you could say that what Jeff was doing made more sense in that this is the United Nations, that's the globalists, and that Trump is really a globalist and will become a globalist because he just has self-interest. But we know now that Trump actually is principled. Doesn't seem like a very principled person to us, but he does have principles that he operates on. And he can't be a globalist. Trump just can't do that, right? It's against his nature, right? It's like the fox and the scorpion. You know, the fox taking the scorpion across the lake, and the scorpion, stings the fox and kills it. The scorpion can only act according to his nature. Trump can only act according to his nature, right? So, but be that as it may, just symbolically as a prophecy, this mighty king that stands up and rules with great dominion can't be the United States. It has to be this spiritualistic power that's represented later by the king of the South. And if you're going to have this conflict, here, that conflict has to be the same conflict later. And we know it's the king of the North is the United States and the papacy combined, and that the king of the South is the Soviet Union. It's spiritually Sodom and Egypt. So if we take historically what's happening here and we apply it, we would have to say that this mighty king that stands up, it's not Joe Biden, but it is the globalists conquering the United States. And that's one of the things that Alexander is going to do, is he's going to conquer Persia, right?
And then they would give power to the king of the North, the papacy, right? After the fact.
Okay, so we have to. So part of the problem that we had with Daniel chapter 11 is each of these sections just is a repeat and enlarge of the history at the end, right? So when we come back to this tomorrow, we're going to start addressing these problems because Alexander's kingdom is going to be divided, and it creates this north and south polarity. But that north and south polarity initially exists in a sense between Persia and Greece. So what happens with Persia and Greece is then going to be expand and happen within Greece itself when it falls. And that's going to then be transferred to Rome, which is going to be the king of the North. Right? And then that king of the North, it's going to become the papacy. Right? So to me, there's inconsistency in trying to say, well, we're just going to make Alexander the United States. Now, it's true to some degree that he is, because the United States is conquered by the globalists. But Trump isn't a part of that. He's the one who gets defeated on January 6th, right? Now, it's true that he will then eventually, the Republicans will triumph. That is, the king of the North will conquer the king of the South. But that's not Alexander. Because Alexander's not the king of the North, he's the king of the South in this context. Nothing to do with his geographical location, just on how we're applying the symbols. Okay, so we'll come back to that tomorrow. But for now, unless there's a final comment that's important. Is there any final comment? Okay. So let's pray. Dear Father in heaven, we give our hearts to you, Lord. We ask that you can use us throughout this day. Thank you for the study and the time that we've had together. Help us to continue to study these things and to understand them. And be with each person in their daily struggles. Help us to come together again according to thy will. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.